Coraline. A movie for babies, for little itty bitty kitties. Or at least so I thought when I was 8 years old. I mean, look at that cover. It doesn't look all too scary, just some blue-haired girl and some buttons. Easy stuff, I thought. Wrong. That movie scarred me. Like, what in God's name is this? Or this? What sadistic fuck watched this and said, hey, I know who this movie is made for? 6-year-olds. I was terrified the first time I watched this film. I had nightmares for like a solid 2 years. I always had this fear that I'd wake up and the beldam would be standing in the corner of my room staring at me. You know, and just when I thought I got over that fear, I'm sitting in school a day before the autumn holidays and the teacher says she'll put on one of her favorite movies. Can you guess what movie that was? Well, it wasn't fucking Barbie's Playhouse. Trauma aside, this movie grew on me and I absolutely adore it. Retrospectively, I understand that it is catered to kids, yet even now I find it unnerving and quite frankly disturbing at times. And yes, I know we've all seen this movie, we all have our fond memories of it, but I still felt the desire to give this masterpiece of animation a little tribute. So some people might not know this, but the book Coraline was written by Neil Gaiman, who is a fantastic author who at this point in time has had many of his works adapted into film and TV, ranging from American Gods to Good Omens. Yet Coraline was a very special case. Originally written for his, at the time, 5-year-old daughter, publishers told him, that wasn't a great idea since the book is absolutely terrifying, so he gave it to a co-worker's daughter to read. She approved it and so the book was published. Well, you probably think if a kid approved, it can't have been that bad. No, you're wrong. She was absolutely scared shitless by the book and lied because she wanted to know what would happen next, and I find that hilarious. It's interesting though, because as scary as the movie is, its messaging and themes are incredibly appropriate to kids, and even though it may scar them for life, it has a direction and purpose in which the horror is kind of integral. The concept of perspective is a huge part of the story, sometimes in quite obvious ways, like the button eyes or the eyepiece, but also in subtle ways. There's a great video about Coraline and perspective, which I will link in the description, but to sum it up, the beldam and her world are meant to appeal to the point of view of Coraline, or rather kids in general. However, once they look at it more closely, they realize it's a trap and the beldam can't be trusted. It's pretty clear how this message can be quite useful to kids. And we notice at the end that Coraline's world doesn't actually change at all. The only thing that changes is her outlook upon it. It's really clever, and I bet when you rewatch the movie, you'll be quite surprised by how well that message is woven, no pun intended, into the story. There are so many things that make this movie so beautiful, yet also so unnerving. Like the other mother humming her own leitmotif, as if in control of not just her world, but also the movie we are watching. It's actually really, really freaky. The way her character design distorts more and more, the more that Coraline criticizes her and looks through her disguise. There's so many little details you can find in this film. Every character in the story has such a distinct purpose, from Coraline's eccentric neighbors, her boring parents, all the way to the mysterious world-jumping cat. They all ooze so much personality and make the story and world so charming. This is also thanks to the masterful stop-motion design this movie has. I mean, they animated thousands of different facial expressions for each character. I mean, we all know Laika is a fantastic studio and never misses when it comes to their animation, yet that mixed with the Tim Burton-esque expressionist designs make this one of their best projects. Henry Selick, Laika, and the mind of Gaiman managed to create one of the most charming, beautiful, yet unnerving pieces of stop-motion animation ever to exist. And in case you guys didn't know, Laika hardly makes any profit. Movies like these don't earn jack shit because they're so incredibly labor-intensive. The only reason we even have the privilege of seeing these kinds of movies is all because Laika is headed by Travis Knight, the only child of Nike founder Phil Knight. No, you heard me right, the sneaker brand Nike is the only reason these movies have the funding they need, which explains the weird-ass sneaker collabs that Nike would drop whenever Laika releases a movie. Coraline is not just a masterpiece of an animated children's movie, it's also a masterpiece of horror. Yes, I know, many people don't consider this a horror movie, which I mean, what the fuck? What? Sure, I get that if you see this as a kid's movie, it's hard to mix that with what we typically associate with the horror genre, but it has all the elements of good horror present. The mystery, the music, the monster, the distorted reality. I'd even argue that the element of the movie that people associate with a kid's movie, the animation, is what makes this movie even creepier. They do not move like humans, they move like dolls, they move like an uncanny imitation of human beings. It's this uncanniness that makes us so uneasy when watching the film. Personally, my trauma with this movie aside, I think that having a horror movie that is for the most part accessible to kids is really fantastic. Horror is a great genre, and good good horror is all too rare, and the amount of people that I know that have grown up with this movie and would admit they were terrified of it as a kid are still the ones that have a special place for it in their heart. The horror mixed with the charm, it captivates children, and I believe that Laika used their mastery of animation to make this movie more appropriate for kids and at the same time more terrifying for adults. This movie is the epitome of a family horror film. I think that's my conclusion. So do me a favor and get the fam together this Hallows Eve, and collectively turn on this movie while sewing buttons into each other's eyes. Conocedor Sam out.